All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is our show for the week of February 16th, 2025. This is episode 375 of Enough to Keep Going. This is a time when maybe an old creative team is wrapping up a storyline, or a new creative team is getting introduced, or maybe there is somebody coming back from the dead, teased in our foil embossed annual, anniversary edition here at episode number 375. But here on the Enough to Keep Going, it is just the classic crew being with you all 375 episodes and more as we keep going. I am your host for tonight, DBQ Hams. Tom Master is out sick, as there has been plenty of illness going around in February, no matter where you're living. But always running the boards on the mic is Game Logic. Game Logic, how are you, sir?
So I wasn't exactly sure where you were going with the intro, and I was like, I smell notes of comic booky in here, but then I finally locked it in, so I get it.
Okay, well, it took a while, a little meandering. That's okay. I was filling some airtime as you got everything up and ready. So we took a week off. Go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I'm saying I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, took a week off last week. It was Super Bowl here in America, and so we are back. Glad to be back. We got
it was a Super Bowl here in America for everywhere but Kansas City, apparently.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, if your colors were red and yellow, it was a tough one. But yeah, we'll keep moving on. So, but as you're wearing a black and green shirt, that's okay. So very hopefully everybody's had a good Valentine's Day, or at least made it through, and are ready for. We're coming into the last 2 weeks of February with lots of game releases. So we'll talk about those at the end of the show as well. And as we always do, we'll start off with some new games or some big games of the week that we've been playing that have taken up some of our time, head into some headlines and some discussion around the game industry of the week, and round out with everything else or at least some other notes and highlights of things that we've been playing. Tonight, I'm going to start off because last week, first look, kind of a demo of the new PGA Tour 2K25 dropped on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation 5. This is by HB Studio. HB Studio, they, back in the mid-teens into the late teens, did the Golf Club series, and then was picked up by 2K in 2021, and this is their third 2K PGA game. So it's a every other year kind of schedule. So 21, 23, they had Tiger Woods on the cover, and now here at 25, and it is releasing next week. But they have a demo up with the back 9 of one course, and you start off with a character level. This is very much shades of NBA 2K in terms of some of its player progression, and VC in terms of microtransactions. But you start off at 65 overall, and in the demo, you can level up to level 10, which gains you ability points, and your overall can make its way, and it's capped at level 70. So I've done that on Xbox, making my way through that now on PlayStation 5 as well. And I spent a lot of time with 2K21. So just in terms of kind of the game itself, spent a lot of time with 2K21. I own 2K23 on PlayStation 5. Enjoyed it, but not nearly as much as 21. The swing system changed. In 21, the swing meter was on the bottom. Basically, usually what the golf club swing mechanisms have been, it's either the right or left stick, depending on which hand you are, that you are pulling down for your backswing and then pushing up forward. And the speed and the straightness affects the accuracy of your hit. And that's been consistent across all three games, that it, depending on the level of difficulty, the kind of margin of error in there gets narrower and narrower as there's in this one, there's 6 different difficulties, starting with kind of a true swing. So very forgiving, then an amateur and a pro-am and a pro and a master and a legend. I've toyed around with pro, still hitting in the positive, or hitting above par there. With amateur and pro-am, I've been able to get under par, but it forces you to really focus in on the accuracy of your downswing and your front swing, your forward swing. So one of the differences here is in 2K21, the swing meter itself was along the bottom, and you had kind of a gray and then a white spot where your kind of sweet spot was. You could overswing for some additional power. Depending on where you would set the lie or set the distance, it would tell you this is a 95% or an 87% swing and kind of give you the target there. The same thing was true in 2K23, but the swing meter went to very similar to what PGA Tour from EA did as well, where the swing meter's kind of along the side of the golfer. So as you're doing your swing, your meter's going up with you as well. On the UI there is, in addition to that swing meter, which kind of tells you kind of where you want to stop and begin your, finish your swing, on the right-hand side of the screen, there's also kind of a little meter that shows you the accuracy. And so if it kind of traces the path of your stick. So if you are swinging off to an angle a little bit, it'll show you that. If you're pushing up straight, it'll line up as perfect. Fast will pull you to the left, kind of a fade or a draw, depending on if you're pushing up too fast or too slow. So that impacts that as well. But one of the things in 25 that they've added is, so instead of having it along the side of the golfer, you now have, it's only just the circle kind of UI on the right hand side that gives you kind of it gives you a ring. And as you start your swing, that ring starts to expand. And then as you start your forward swing, it contracts back down. And still the path of your swing impacts the direction. But one of the things that they've added here is kind of acknowledgement that for most golfers, it's not a straight up and down swing, that there's naturally you have either a little bit of a draw or a fade. And so depending on the build, so the way that 23 did this and 25 kind of follows along is that you have archetypes of golfers. So maybe you're a greens master with really good chipping and putting skills, or you're a powerhouse with really great driving, but lacking in accuracy. So there's 5 different archetypes. I've done a tactician at this point, which is more focused on accuracy and provides a little bit more forgiveness in terms of the accuracy of your swing as well, which is helpful in terms of learning. But depending on the type of club you're using, depending on the type of golfer that you are, your a perfect swing may pull to the left or to the right a little bit as well. So oftentimes, the downswing may be pulling just a little bit, almost like the 5 o'clock spot and up to the 11 o'clock spot versus a straight 12 and 6. If you think of it in terms of on a clock of that circle. So that adds a little bit more, it changes up the rhythm a little bit. If you've been used to just trying to really focus on straight stick skills, that it forces you to kind of angle that a little bit. It does provide a little bit more depth and nuance. I found the swing meter in 23, didn't enjoy it as much. It didn't feel as precise as it did in 21. 21, I spent a lot of time with, felt really comfortable on multiple difficulties. 23, it always felt like there was just a little bit of lag. But here, this is really, it feels really tight, really precise, and really accurate. I'm enjoying it. One of the knocks I read early on Reddit in terms of, or actually on Operation Sports forum, one of the knocks of this first look was the animations in the swing. And when I read that, I realized I'm not paying attention to what my character looks like as he's swinging. I'm focused on the UI and trying to get to the right meter, the right, amount of power and the straightness of my stick. I'm not looking at my character at all. And so to me, that feels really kind of a minor complaint, because the trade-off is that it provides a little more accuracy and a nuance in the stick aspects. Spending time talking about the stick swing, just like in 2K23, here in 25, they also have a 3-button. They added a 3-button, kind of their traditional, 1990s golf aspect of start the meter, stop the meter, stop the meter again. The start, stop, and back. So that still exists in here as well. I haven't really played around with that much, because I have always found the stick swing really kind of satisfying. I never got really good at the stick pitching in MLB The Show, right? In MLB The Show, you can kind of trace that stick a little bit in terms of the type of pitch and the accuracy that you want, rather than button pushing, or rather than the pulsing of kind of the accuracy in MLB The Show. But here it really feels just like using the stick in 2K in terms of shooting a basketball. Using the stick for your swing feels connected to the gameplay much more than the button press. So it ends up really, the demo is pretty limited. There's no wind involved, so you're not necessarily playing with that if you're doing some of the tutorials. And there's quests associated with doing the tutorials that give you virtual currency, which allow you to, as you level up your character, you can spend those points in different abilities, whether that's power or accuracy or the forgiveness in kind of the sweet spot, whether that's kind of your short game or your long game. There's not only kind of your player character skill attributes like you would have in a Bethesda game, but then you also have kind of a traditional Diablo-like skill tree as well, that as you level up, you're also gaining ability points to put into different things, whether that's recovery or hitting out of a bunker better, or having, again, a wider sweet spot in your stick skills, so that you're not, the higher the difficulty goes, the smaller that sweet spot becomes. So there's a number of character progression pieces in there. They feel nicely paced with the kind of XP that you get. I also can see that in order to level up your my player character, you're going to have to spend virtual currency. And so it certainly has the potential for some kind of pay to win in that aspect of kind of having a lot of virtual currency at the start, but you don't have unlimited points, similar to NBA 2K, where, you can throw a bunch of virtual currency in and level up some of your attributes, but those have caps based on your overall level. So as your overall level climbs, those point caps increase as well. So you're going to need some VC. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of how it's doled out in the main game itself. It seems like, playing around gives you a relatively small amount of virtual currency that potentially, if you're playing on a tour and winning a tour or placing, making the cut after each different round, you'll probably win some virtual currency there as well, if it tracks with what's happened in the other previous series. But also there's a number of quests involved here. So, doing all the tutorials or hitting under par 3 times in a row gives you, completes a quest on each different difficulty that, provides you some more virtual currency. So I've got maybe one skill point that I could level up, but I don't have enough virtual currency. So I'm a little bit behind there. I could hit that cap. So it gives me a reason to keep playing. But in terms of the overall gameplay, I'm finding it definitely improved over 23. I'm finding the graphics very improved over 23. So playing this over the past week or so also caused me to go back and play 23 and boot up, put a disc back in for 21 to kind of compare those as well. And the graphical upgrades, both on 4K in performance and in graphics mode, but even on a 1080p TV, the graphics look much better than what they did in 23. So definitely some graphical updates here in addition to gameplay updates. So I am trying to talk myself into what edition I purchase because I'm really enjoying it. It's one of those where knowing that it's something that's not going to have an annual release, that it's going to be every other year, I feel like I could stick around with it quite a bit. I enjoy video game golf, have always enjoyed video game golf. The first game I ever purchased with the Super Nintendo was PGA Tour. So it's always, it's a style of game that I really enjoy. One of the things I didn't enjoy very much on 23 was the 2K-ness of it, going from 21 to 23, where there were consumable golf balls and points to, very much it felt way too NBA 2K kind of virtual currency microtransaction focused. And here it feels like they've dialed that back a bit. It's still there, but it isn't nearly as, it doesn't feel as restrictive as it did in 23. And so to me that's encouraging, because that was ultimately one of the things that I kind of bounced off of 23 about, was if I'm using virtual currency or real money to buy consumable golf balls to give me an edge, that really kind of just left a sour taste in my mouth. Where here, I'm feeling like I'm enjoying the gameplay more and the kind of over the topness of microtransactions, especially in the same week when we hear about the new WWE game that's going to have a My Park aspect to it. They call
it the Island.
The Island, right? Where you're going around running quests and leveling up your character. So there's not that aspect yet in NBA and PGA. It definitely feels like they're a little more conservative. Half Brick Studios has really done a solid golf game job over the last basically a decade. The first golf club came out in 24, and prior to that, they had experience doing a lot of sports games ports, NBA Live, FIFA, Madden for PlayStation Portable, Wii. They were doing a number of different, but really since the kind of 2017, they've been doing nothing but golf games, and it really shows. They've really honed their game, and I'm looking forward to this as I am kind of droning on and fawning over it.
So, I mean, to the series' credit, there have always been, in the openings of the game, a requirement for you to level up to gain access to like equipment. Like even way back, like in the early 2000s, like you would, when you start the game, you would only have access to like certain types of balls, and you would have a limited number of clubs in your bag, and you would have to buy access to those, and other things that would help you improve your game, like shoes and other types of equipment. So I'm not sure how egregious it's gotten, but like some element of that has always been there, even before it was in-game current, like points, you were like virtual currency, there was always in-game
earned currency.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and here I think mainly, I mean, you are still seeing that with the clubs, that you are unlocking clubs, you can purchase clubs, that different sponsorships will open up different aspects of clubs. You get those sponsorships by winning a certain amount or meeting certain win conditions in terms of in the tournament scene. From what I've seen and what it's been in the past, most of all the apparel, shoes, clothes, gloves, things like that have been simply cosmetic. A lot of their kind of season pass aspects have mainly been cosmetic, or that they've been cosmetic on clubs or cosmetic in clothes. hasn't really, kind of unlocked a amazing driver type of thing at the same time.
So you mentioned that there seemed to be like clear and apparent graphical and visual fidelity improvements from the previous version that you played. Is that mainly around like the character models, or is there additional buffing going on with the weather system and environmental effects and sun bloom, sun flare, that type of stuff?
I think definitely in the lighting, the lighting on the courses is stronger. Feels more dynamic. This, the demo only gives you a nice sunny day on a back nine, so you don't necessarily see if there's weather conditions. So I can't really speak to that aspect. The character models definitely do look better, but again, you're spending a whole lot more time looking at the scenery than you are actually your character models. And the scenery, whether it's the fairways, the landscape around it, everything feels really, really polished and well defined, and less kind of either flat in some cases or kind of polygony in others in previous editions.
Any sense of additional graphical enhancements that have come into this one? I mean, do you know that it has ray tracing or not?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. I haven't looked at what the PC version or what the PS5 Pro upgrades look like. It certainly would make sense that it does. Whether that's going to be on launch or not, I don't know.
Okay, but you did mention you are playing in 4K. Is that accurate?
Yes, yeah, playing on 4K, both at the graphical, either a standard kind of on PlayStation 5 and a 4K monitor or TV, HDR looks good, and looking the differences graphically in performance and quality don't seem super pronounced, but definitely the HDR in the quality, it feels more pronounced there.
And I don't know how well you know golf or but like commentators, is it like well-known names like on the PGA Tour, or is it just?
That's a good question. I don't know. And again, we only really hear one commentator here. In 223, there were a couple different commentators. Yeah, honestly, most of the time, this is a game. This has always been a podcast game for me, right? Like I'll have something else playing in the background as I'm making my way through a course. Every once in a while, if I hit a good shot or a terrible shot, I'll turn it on. But I'm not necessarily listening to a lot of the commentary. So I've listened to the commentary here. It feels it's still, the main commentator is still the main commentator that they've used for the last two iterations as well.
Okay. Yeah, very cool.
All right, let's move on to our next segment with some news headlines. Let's start off here. We've talked about variety of awards over the past few months. We had the BAFTAs a couple weeks ago. This week we have the DICE Award winners. So just want to highlight a couple here. We've got a wide range of categories. Again, but one of the things I was pleased to see in Outstanding Achievement in Story and in Adventure Game of the Year. No, Story and Achievement in Character. Two different categories. Indiana Jones and it was the winner there. But that was good to see a late release in the year. One of the things that doesn't necessarily make a lot of traditional end of the year lists because it came out in December. So some of these post New Year award shows give a chance to have a full comparison of things that came out in the year. We've got Outstanding Technical Achievement. Astrobot was a winner in a number of different categories. Outstanding Technical Achievement. It was also the overall game of the year in terms of both overall game of the year, also outstanding achievement in game design. So technical achievement in game design was Astrobot. Balatro had mobile game, independent game, and strategy game. And then Helldivers got some good recognition here as well with online game of the year, musical, both in composition and audio design. Helldivers won as well. So Indiana Jones, Helldivers, and Astrobot seem to be kind of the big winners in the DICE Awards. Any surprises or any notes that you want to comments here, Game?
My only comment is a few weeks ago on the Basement Radio Arcade podcast, David Jaffe came through, and so we were talking to him, and he and I kicked around noting that for the nominations, because that list obviously came out like 2 or 3 weeks ago, prior to the awards, there was a lot of variety in the titles that had gotten nominated. At the TGAs, you tend to kind of see the same, the 6 games that got into the Game of the Year awards category also tend to be like the games that are nominated for like every other category, right? Which admittedly makes sense, but the aperture of variance is fairly low on the TGAs in comparison. And this year there were a lot of other titles. But now in post game, right, as we look rearward and look at the awards having been completed and those nominees actually, getting awards, it seems like a fairly short list of who awards went to.
Yeah, I would agree. The nominations were much more diverse, but the winners kind of still bubble up in some of the same names that we've been hearing again and again.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what's behind that. I mean, it sort of feels like a little like Hollywood is right now, where it's like the same top 6 actors and actresses that you see in one movie are also the people cast for like every other movie. But yeah, I haven't quite pulled that apart yet to think about like what is that saying, right, about the industry. It may simply be saying that like a lot of the members of the AIAS board were too busy fighting to keep their jobs this year, to really get around to play a lot of the games that were nominated. So, but who knows?
It's a fair statement, as everybody is probably fighting to keep their jobs in the game industry to some level of degree. Well, let's move on to our next story here with something that maybe we can peel back some layers on as well. Game Logic, you've got a story out of GameSpot in terms of one of the Steam hardware surveys.
Yeah, as mentioned, the story over on GameSpot by Stephen T. Wright. Almost half of Steam users still use Windows 10 despite impending end of life. Windows 11 has been here for a while, but that doesn't mean that Windows 10 users are willing to go gentle into that good night despite its impending end of life date of October 14th, 2025. As spotted by PC Guide, according to Steam's January 2025 hardware and software survey, more than 44% of the storefront's users are still on Windows 10, with more than 55% opting for Windows 11. So it's interesting, this story. It's true, I guess, sort of, but I mean, I'm absolutely certain at some point in the last 6 months, GameSpot, if not GameSpot themselves, right, then many other news outlets have run the story that, oh my God, like, the adoption for Windows 11 has like turned the corner and finally peaked, right, and grabbed majority share. So, I mean, it's fine for this news story to be a couple weeks lag and say the exact opposite. I don't know that this is particularly surprising. I think, the PC gaming demographic on Steam is an intermix of people who are super wrapped around the axle about hardware, and so buy top of the line, the best everything. They are a very, very small percentage. As we saw, 2 generations ago, the most popular card was the 3060, right? That's what the mainstream typically buys. And then you have a bucket of so you have a bucket of gamers who's like, they will not convert to Windows 11 until you pry Windows 10 out of their cold dead hands, or force them. And even then, they're gonna hack the registry and do other things to stay on Windows 10. And some of them will continue to stay on Windows 10 despite the fact that it's not getting any security updates. So I don't know that this is particularly surprising. Again, I would put the surprise shoe back on the other foot, which to me is at the 55% are on Windows 11. Since the end of life date got announced, I mean, almost within weeks, I just said, well, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off and go ahead and convert everything to Windows 11, because more than stepping up to the next operating system, what I can't stand is having some machines on Windows X and having other machines on Windows X -1. I've despised that for close to 25 years at this point. And I always say when I upgrade one, I'm gonna just upgrade everything. So it's interesting, and I'm in the crowd, right, of people who said, oh, you're end of lifing it. I'm not gonna wait till the last minute, right, and figure everything out that I need to figure out in the midst of being in this time frame when it's a crisis, right, and I have no choice. So I don't know, your thoughts, DBQ.
I think my thoughts is probably more like I'll be interested to see what a September survey brings in terms of, and honestly, I don't know what the percentage was as we were pending kind of end of life to Windows 8, right?
It was much different because because PC gamers bought into all of the FUD that the media was throwing around that asserted that Windows 8 was horrible. When quite honestly, it wasn't. All you had to do was bypass the whole, taking to the screen takeover, full screen thing. You could configure that in Windows so it booted into the regular start menu.
Right, because 8 was like the tiles and everything else.
Yes,
right? Like we had I think in that kind of generation changeover, we probably had more people holding on to the end of life of 7 than we did with 8.
Yeah. And when 10 became available, almost everybody swerved super fast.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. All right, let's move on to our next story. We've got announcement here of a remaster and a kind of enhanced edition over on IGN coming to the Switch.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. That's
okay. Yep, this new story over on IGN by Whistler and Pool. System Shock 2 Enhanced Edition renamed to System Shock 2 25th Anniversary Remaster, also coming to Nintendo Switch. Night Dive Studios announced that System Shock 2 Enhanced Edition, its modernization edition of the 1999 classic sci-fi horror action role-playing game, isn't that a mouthful, has been renamed System Shock 2 25th Anniversary Remaster. That also rolls off the tongue. Is also coming to the Nintendo Switch. System Shock 2 25th Anniversary Remaster will soon be released on Windows PC via Steam and Good Old Games, and on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and Nintendo Switch. So this is great. System Shock 2 was actually, I think like the first game that I bought when I came back to PC gaming in 1999. So, it's always had a near and dear place in my heart. I was totally duped because all the hubbub around System Shock and its remake and remaster, I automatically assumed people that whole time were actually talking about System Shock 2 because System Shock 2 has always been the more popular of the games and the one that took like a severe swerve from what System Shock was. So when System Shock dropped, I was like, what? Why did anybody bother redoing this thing? So this is great that this is coming back. I hope it's worthy of the name remaster, right? I hope it modernizes it and really brings it into the 21st century, and that's what it looks like. I'm hoping. Yeah, we'll see how well this one does. This really probably, in my mind, obviously, because it's one of my favorite games, warranted an actual just a straight up remake. The remaster, I'm hoping for the best, but I also worry that it's going to have like a ton of like late 90s, jaggy edges, pasted over, face photos over human people renders, fists that aren't really formulated of individual fingers, but are just like an amorphous ball of clay on the end of an arm. So, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'll be curious about it as well. I last year played Night Dive's System Shock remaster, and definitely looks better than the previous kind of remasters that were out there. There was another one that was done in the teens. Certainly, I played it on PlayStation 5. It was not a remake, right? It was an up, and Night Dive has done this with other games as well. Like these are up-res. Night Dive has done things like Shadow Man, and they've done a variety of these remasters of the late 90s. I think they were responsible for the Turok ones as well. They've done a number of, and they're solid remasters, but they are remasters. They really keep the mechanics and the interactions. Maybe they change the interface a little bit. The control scheme is more modern, but in terms of the full on game models and general systems within the game are very much still there. At least they were in the remaster of System Shock 1. So I'll be interested to see if this does more, or if it is kind of along what Night Dive has been producing. But as you said, given the lineage and the kind of significance historically of System Shock 2, they certainly could lean into this and produce something a little bit more in depth. So, Borowana, thanks for joining us. Glad to have you here. Always good, even if we were a little late as well, so don't feel too bad. All right. Game Logic, anything else on System Shock 2? Or do we want to move into our next news story?
Yeah, we can just go ahead to the next one.
Which is you again, in terms of moving on from some Steam user surveys over to some Epic Store news.
Yeah, so this news story over on The Verge by Jay Peters. The Epic Games Store's year in review is live. In 2024, Epic saw 295 million Epic Games Store PC users, up 25 million year over year, according to a blog post. 595 million free games were claimed during the year as well. Epic is promising a bunch of improvements to the Epic Games Store in 2025, including gifting, preloading, and multi-platform social features. Tail of the tape, like I said, 295 million plus total PC users, nearly 898 million Epic cross-platform accounts. So people playing Epic games on console, thereby also having accounts. So that's so if you take the number on PC who are actually playing out of the Epic launcher, that's 300 million. You've got about another, 2 times as many people playing Epic games. Probably, granted, a great vast number of them playing Fortnite on consoles as well. So, 100 million a piece or 200 million a piece for the 3 console manufacturers. That's, of course, that's a wild extrapolation that all of them are equal, but but you get the point, right? Lots of people playing their games on other platforms. 74 million monthly active users in December 2024, which is down 1%. So I don't know that the minus 1% is really worthy. It's not statistically significant. 67 million average monthly active users, which to go over the year, which was greater, which is with an increase of 6% year over year, which is an interesting thing considering that, of course, it caught up in these numbers are their mobile users, and you had months of a stretch in 2024 where people were not able to play their games on mobile because they had been pulled from the Google Play Store and from the Apple App Store. And then 32 million average daily active users, which was also up 6%. So, I mean, good news story. It's good that the numbers. I mean, clearly there's less of a full day's worth of sunlight right between them and Steam than there ever has been before. And there's no expectation for that to slow down. Obviously, part of the big draw is the free games, right, that they give out. So, whether or not Epic can continue to afford to do that, which I'm guessing that gets enabled by Unreal Engine money. So, hopefully that will continue. I mean, again, I'm sure that I know there are tons of PC gamers who don't shop at the Epic Game Store, but literally do nothing else but like check in there to see what games are free, grab the free games, right, and then don't play. Unless they also play Fortnite. So it seems like they've made a series of choices that are working for them, and keeping these numbers plussing up. DBQ, any thoughts?
Well, I think that's where I grabbed the follow-up story here from game developer Justin Carter over at Game Developer. Is they have the same information in terms of users, right? And I think you're absolutely right of Fortnite being a huge factor in that marijuana. That almost 900 million Epic users across platforms is pretty a significant number. The fact that total spending on PC games grew 15% year over year on the Epic Store is a good sign for the platform. But I think one of the pieces that kind of, as you were alluding to, Game Logic, for players who jump on the Epic Store, grab the free games, maybe play Epic games, but then don't necessarily spend on anything else, is that they saw a year-over-year decrease in third-party spending. So third-party spending year-over-year was down by 18%. And so this is maybe where the yellow lights come up of warning of the kind of viability of the Epic Store outside of first party, so per se, in terms of Epic released games, that if they're down 18% from 24 to 23, and 23 was down 13% from 23 to 22, that we're seeing a decrease in the kind of spending on games outside of Epic's infrastructure. Granted, Epic's infrastructure is huge and can support this, but the question it raises for me is the overall viability of the store. If it's, I think, is the overall viability of the store. My hesitation there is, yeah, but if we, how do those percentages track if we also look at overall player spending across the industry? That, we talked about surveys last year of more people play, games from 5 to 10 years ago, that only 25%, 24% of people play games that were released in that year. That if that's the case, then we're also seeing that the money spent is on more of those older games, which then translate into things like Fortnite.
I mean, there's a lot of possibilities behind the causality, right, of that down 18% year over year. Those could be going to Epic to buy Football Club, but then when you go to spend money on it, right, doing that all through EA Play, right? So there's lots of different ways to chop this. I mean, I saw online comments about like, that 18% down on third parties is abysmal. Well, it only is if it directly translates to sales. And it only is if it translates directly to sales, and that's not comparable to the rest of the industry, which I just don't know that it is, right? We're still in kind of post-pandemic times. We haven't fully recovered from that. Lots of possibilities. So it's hard to say. But I mean,
yeah, I want to echo Warwana's comment here of Steam having competition. It doesn't make Steam worse, right? Like having some competition in the PC gaming marketplace space is a good thing. So I was glad when Epic launched their store. The percentages, they haven't kind of gone back on their percentages in terms of creators and what their percentage takeaway being higher than Steam's, and it pushed Steam to increase theirs. So those were all good things for the overall marketplace, and having some options, some competition is good overall.
Yeah, I mean, where I've always fallen down about this thing, even even with our own co-host Swiss, who has, I'm not sure where he is on the Epic Game Store now, but was not a fan of the Epic Game Store, didn't like the exclusivity deals and things like that. I think where I have, I guess, respect for Epic, and also am maybe forgiving of Epic with some of the criticism that they get otherwise, they're constantly compared to Steam, and I'm like, I don't know that Epic is trying to be the same thing that Steam is, where Steam tries to be this all-encompassing solution to everything gaming for a PC gamer. They have social platforms now. Now they have a recording codec. All of your media, you can take it, you can do all your game captures and photo captures and stuff in Steam. And then it gets posted to your account. It has a social media aspect to it. It's got the forums and I appreciate it, and it does what it does. But going back to old arguments and warfare ways between Swiss and I, my feedback to Swiss was, I was like, yeah, but I don't use all that stuff. I don't use my Steam friends list. I don't use their video and photo capture stuff. I don't save that stuff to my social media account. I don't maintain my social media account, my profile, and my page and all that stuff on Steam. Essentially, most of the time, my interaction with storefronts is I just need them to be dumb pipes. Just selling my game. I don't need any other stuff. I don't need that in my face. You have the whole thing with the Steam overlay with it's on mouse and keyboard. It's Shift Tab. Which is sometimes not a keystroke that you don't wind up hitting inadvertently. Since my left shift key is literally down all the time in a first-person shooter, right? When I'm running,
definitely pulled that overlay up before, yeah,
and then forgotten how to make it go away, right? And so it's up, the game's going on. You're like, how do I make this thing go away?
Right in the middle of a firefight in a multiplayer match, perfect timing, yeah.
Yeah, so to me, the Steam, it's not even so much about Steam not being all that it's cracked up to be. It's that the constant comparison to, Steam, literally Epic is a game store. It is not even super wrapped around the axle about being a launcher. In fact, most of the times that you purchase stuff through Epic and it shoehorns you into a third-party launcher, Epic doesn't care if you launch the game from that third-party launcher. So like I said, I don't know that a lot of the smoke that it gets is warranted, because I don't know that it's trying to be all the things that Steam is trying to be. They definitely want you in there playing Fortnite. That's another thing to consider. That's the other thing I forgot to mention is the 18% down year-on-year spending. Well, quite frankly, Epic did a lot of what I keep forgetting what the term is. There is a term when Apple takes an app, right, that's made by a third-party vendor, and then goes to WDC, which is their big developer event that happens every May, June, and reveals a new component of iOS that is eerily very similar to an app that was in the App Store. And then that developer can't do anything, but they just need to go do a new app, right? Or they can retain theirs and continue selling it, but there's no, they complain about, you could complain all day, right? But and Epic definitely can be kind of accused of doing a similar thing with this whole, what is the Fortnite thing called, where they have all the other games inside the Fortnite ecosystem, guitar,
the whole metaverse of Fortnite.
Yeah. And you could you could definitely, they can definitely be accused of that having a chilling effect, right, on devs in smaller games, and a worry that, what are they going to replicate next? What are they going to put in the game store? So, and sucking more people into Fortnite, right? Who now don't spend as much time maybe exploring the Epic Game Store, but since Fortnite is free, just come into Fortnite, now have access to additional gaming content. So, like I said, lots of different reasons, but I don't know. I think it's okay. I think, like Warwana says, right, it's good to have competition. I sometimes find it also very strange that the running dialogue was constantly complaining about Steam being a monopoly, and the moment they're not a monopoly, it's complaining about the thing that makes them not a monopoly, right? So it's so strange.
One of the things I do appreciate about the Epic Store is, for as potentially beneficial as Steam is for smaller devs to get something out there, that it never feels nearly as crowded on Epic as it does on Steam, right? you're still getting indies, but those indies often are things that maybe they have a publisher to them, or they've been, it is not simply always a whole lot of self-published stuff that's out there. And so while Steam is good for that, and some of the games I'll talk about tonight are self-published and single individuals, but it also is, increasingly difficult to discover those within the Steam infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about that for years. The moment in time, I want to say 2017 maybe, that Steam just basically said, yeah, we're not doing any more governance over what gets published. Like it shouldn't be our job to tell developers and studio and publishers what they can publish, or gamers, what they can buy. So any governance that we do now will be after the fact, right? You publish the game. If people get offended by it, and there's a big row, then we'll step in and take action, right? But obviously, you can see the vast amount of hentai content, right, that's on Steam, and you can tell that it's kind of the Wild West on there. And you're right, like Epic, Steam feels like that EB Games or Toys R Us or the Babbages that was not well managed and maintained, and you'd go in there and there'd just be like game boxes all over, like intermixed on all the shelves, and toys like that somebody had just put back on a game shelf or something, versus Epic, which feels like a well orderly managed like Target, right, in comparison to a Walmart, right? And there's something to be said for that. Like I don't go to Epic and find that my time gets wasted as much, and yes, Steam has maybe better search tools and curation tools for you to do that on your own. But I would also say, yeah, that's good that Steam has them, because you have to, right, to make that thing any, at all usable and worthwhile. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how these strategies continue to clash, right, in terms of the different alternatives that they offer to gamers.
Yeah, so true. All right, let's move on into our final segment here as we talk about what else we've been playing over the course of the week, or 2 weeks in our case, since we were out last week with the Super Bowl. We talked about System Shock during the remaster, during the news segment. Game Logic, you have Bioshock on yours, but Bioshock Infinite. And how did this pop up in your rotation? Or what pulled you back into Bioshock Infinite after over a decade?
Well, it's interesting because we ran the story tonight, right, about System Shock 2, and the Bioshock franchise is considered a spiritual successor to System Shock 2. This was just because I was playing on my box that's connected to the 240 hertz 25-inch monitors, and so the only thing that's worthwhile for me to play on that box, other than Call of Duty, is other first-person shooters. So I was just kind of panning around looking for best shooters to play in 2025, and I just randomly picked a list and randomly picked the thing off the list, and this was it. So I love Bioshock Infinite. I've gone back and played it a couple of times. It is kind of like Bioshock Infinite is to Bioshock 1 and 2 as Torchlight is to Diablo 2, right? It really kind of smooths out and improves upon a lot of the things that were kind of ragged, tattered edges, in Bioshock 1 and 2. It's also, again, being a minority, it's also super interesting to, play through a story that kind of puts that racial contention front and center and really doesn't shy away from it in how it addresses it.
Yeah, definitely makes that part of its narrative piece. This game actually came back on my radar over the past couple of weeks as I've been at work and looking up, working on a project around game narratives, and a lot of critical analysis, both positive and kind of critical of Bioshock's narrative, but a lot of discourse on this game.
Yeah, so that was pretty much it.
How's it running on your box?
It runs great, and more importantly, there was a game that I pulled out. I think I talked about it last week or last time we were on, where Fallout 3. I think it was. So I went back.
I think it was Fallout 4 that you couldn't get running.
Fallout 4, yes.
The frame rate was like it ran too fast and crashed it. Yep.
Yes. Fortunately, did not have that problem with Bioshock Infinite. So it takes all of the additional oomph, of a 3070 Ti and an AMD Ryzen 5 5600X, 64 gigabytes of RAM, and deals with it. So that's good. You could see it. there's no it has a setting to cap the frame rate, but then it doesn't tell you, it doesn't have a slider for you to set. So I didn't set it because I was like, please don't watch me set this thing and have it like cap the frame rate at like 60 frames per second. So I was like, I'll just risk it. Right? So I mean, you can see it, you can see the GPU running faster than frames can actually be generated on the monitor, which I never like, because then my GPU is just running clock cycles that it doesn't need to. But other than like some minor things like that in terms of modernization versus an older game running on a modernized PC stack, it runs fine and looks great.
Cool. Well, you mentioned first-person shooters, so let's move into our Call of Duty segment of the week, as you've also got some Black Ops 6 play in here.
Yeah, nothing too much to mention about that, about the game itself. I guess, so first of all, amazingly enough, so Double XP weekend was last weekend. I don't know why. It was Super Bowl weekend, so unless they were just making a competitive alternative and taking advantage of that of gamers who didn't want to watch the Super Bowl, but that was also a weekend when the PlayStation Network went down, and so Double XP weekend which already ran through Tuesday. For some reason, last week, which was not a 3-day weekend, got extended to like Wednesday. So like I got on Wednesday and I was like, wait, it's still Double XP? Oh, heck yeah. So, I continued to grind. And then Double XP weekend started again like 2 days later, which is just amazing. So it's Double XP weekend again right now, which obviously makes sense. It's a 3-day weekend for a lot of people. The other thing is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles got dropped in this week as some type of content. I don't know whether that's a bundle that you have to buy, or I'm sure it's a bundle that you have to buy. I haven't been exposed to any type of like LTEs or LTMs like oriented around them. The Terminator was brought into the game at the beginning of the season. It is also not time for the mid-season Reloaded. So this kind of threw me off a little bit, because I was like, they put the turtles in there. I was like, wait a second, are we halfway through the season already? We're not. So I don't know if there's an increased drumbeat going on right now in them bringing in kind of metaverse type of content. And if so, that's fine. I worry about them being able to maintain that pace, and like Call of Duty has already gotten Fortnite-ish enough now. So it's interesting. I just worry that they take it too far. Bringing in the turtles is fine. That's very COD demographic specific. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of COD players who like turtles. When, at the point where I see something like Strawberry Shortcake or something being pulled into the game, then I'm like, okay, everything here is now just I mean, when I say cash grab, that's cash grab beyond what Call of Duty already is, right? So we'll see how that goes. I have not come across the turtles yet, so I don't know if it's just a bundle that's being brought in and it won't have anything to do with like modes and whatnot, which makes it a different type of content strategy than we've historically seen, in the past. In terms of them making a big deal out of it, like Peter Stormare was brought in as a skin, but like there wasn't like much ado was not made about that, right? He was just a skin, right? And you with an associated bundle and weapon skins and things like that. But the turtles coming in, they've made a very big deal about, and so I've been kind of a little bit caught off guard that like there's not other stuff that, at least that I've seen. Otherwise, my own gameplay wise, I've
kind of turtles for a minute. Do they have
yeah.
like specialized turtle finishers? Like when they brought in the WWE people, they had unique aspects there. Are there stylistic touches that make the gameplay feel any different?
I have not been exposed to them. I assume, my guess based on the way I see them do other bundles like this, I assume that their weapons at least probably have tracers. It would not be unusual for something like that to have like reactive skins, but it seems like this year so far, they've been very stingy with reactive skins. I can't remember, quite frankly, any bundles that jump out at me that I can remember, them having that for. So it seems like they're holding back on the amount of that content that they've historically given, again, specific to dynamic skins. And I assume that they have features. I mean, I shouldn't say that this isn't, well, no, because like when they dropped, so it feels in some ways kind of like Cheech and Chong, right? But when they dropped Cheech and Chong in Modern Warfare 3, there was a mode associated with that, right? There was some goofy psychedelic mode on, I can't remember what that level was called, where everything was like crazy lights, and then like the wall shifted and pillars rose up and down. So it seems like there was more content that went along. It wasn't just like a skin in a bundle. But I'm sure, yeah. So the stuff you asked about, I'm sure that's in there if you purchase the bundle. I just haven't like seen it in a way that it like really stands out to me.
Cool. You were saying some other stuff about.
So the only other thing I was gonna say, I continue to double down on it. I spent a ton of time making loadouts that were like, this is my loadout that is like where like all my weapons are super accurate, right? Because I went through and all the attachments that I put on were like buffs to accuracy. And then I have like a mobility and handling loadout, and some other things like that. So, I've spent more time kind of tailoring and tweaking my loadouts to be tactically specific, right? To like how I want to play or whatever on a given map. I will say, I also feel like I'm being upranked, right, in terms of my SBMM band. Because the gameplay that I've seen in my matches recently has been crazy. I've had matches where I've gone to like with a 2.6 KD, and I've been like the fourth or fifth person on the leaderboard on my team. So I feel like I'm being pulled upwards. I'm not entirely sure what's behind that. I've also had some like horrendously worse matches that just were not the norm through season 1. And they've been these matches where I just like it's a whole team of movement kiddies, and it's apparent that they're all on comms. I'm like, okay, that is not the normal draft, right, that I get pulled into. So that may be happening, in which case there's nothing really to do about it. I just need to roll with those punches, or just have more sucky rounds, right? And hopefully I'll get SBMM down after the fact. But yeah, I've been continuing to have fun playing the game.
Cool. Great. Well, when Tao's back next week, I'm sure we'll get an update from him as well. Just today I saw him while he was sick. I saw him online playing some Call of Duty as well. So
I saw him online playing Call of Duty literally right after he told us he was sick, and I definitely gave that the side eye. But I also said, okay, well, maybe that's his kid playing on his account. So, or, I don't know.
Being sick is a great reason to sit in one place and play video games. So
and
I've used that excuse before.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's COD, so I would think that wouldn't be what you would be playing with the flu. But I will admit, when I've gotten hardcore about it, I mean, I've had my times where I've just logged in and like just dorked around with loadouts, right? Like I just talked about. So I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe he's just like, getting ready for when he's healthy and can play again,
Yeah, well, we'll see what kind of doctor's pass he brings next week when he comes back to the show. So, all right. I've been playing a few games here, some on Steam and on the Steam Deck mainly, but going back through some of the smaller indies that I didn't get a chance to pick up and play last year, things that came out last year. So two of the games I want to highlight here are single dev games, and ones that I picked up on sale, both under $10, and really have enjoyed playing them as kind of a pick up and play 15-minute, 30-minute burst on Steam Deck. So the first one is Rack and Slay, which is billed as pool and a roguelike. So you are a ball, and you are trying to knock other balls, pool balls, basically billiards balls, into holes on the map, on the board. And you clear off a board, and just like in any other roguelike, you move on to, you get a choice of perks potentially as you move from board to board, and you keep going until you fall into a hole yourself or explode. You have kind of a number of damage that you can take. So it starts off really kind of simple, in terms of just kind of lining up shots and trying to bounce things off or hit people. The physics feel good in terms of, I can, hit a ball at an angle and be able to cut it so I can make as anybody who's ever played pool, as you're trying to make that kind of side shot and kiss the edge of the ball so it goes into the pocket you're trying to hit. It has that same type of physics gameplay here, but does so in kind of a roguelike adventure aspect, that you are an anthropomorphized ball with a little set of eyes and a mouth, and you're knocking other balls into their holes. Some of those balls, as you go on, they may have spikes on them, so you'll take some damage, or you may have a shield, or they may have a shield that you need to knock off before you can move them, or you need to bounce, kind of ricochet off and come behind them in order to hit them, rather than hit their shield in the front. Sometimes there's fire effects in terms of maybe you have fire damage that, you have a ball that you're trying to knock out that has flames on it, or that one of your perks may be that the first hit you make on another person provides fire damage to them. So it is, it's something that I haven't spent more than 15-20 minutes at a time, because it's a roguelike. I'll play a run, put it back down, but it's also something that I've been picking up on and off over the last month on my Steam Deck. And it's a single developer. The studio is Ludoculture. Ludo as in like ludography or ludo narrative, and then culture, Kultur. He's done, looks like 3 other games individual here, but really kind of a fun little, I picked it up for like $5, and it's out on Switch as well, which I would think it runs really nicely on Switch. It works. I would love to see a mobile version of this. Like, I can feel myself wanting to pull back my hand to line up the shot and pull back my finger and line that up. It definitely feels like it would fit nicely in that same kind of infrastructure. Looks like it's a German developer here. The other game that I have been playing, and I played the demo back in last summer during one of the Steam Next Fests, and really liked it, really enjoyed it, is Parking Garage Rally Circuit. So this is the kind of art style is Sega Saturn, PlayStation 1, very much in that kind of blocky, pixelated PlayStation 1 era racing game. It is, but it's very arcadey. You've got a little bit of a drift. You're kind of narrow, it starts off kind of simple of just moving through a parking garage, or out into kind of a landscape and back into a parking garage. So you've got some tight turns. You've got cars lined up in different areas that you have to navigate around. You can do a rally where you've got multiple, others in the race with you. You can do time trials. There is kind of a progression mode. It's not very deep in terms of like a career builder, but again, in terms of kind of a fun arcade racer, this definitely hits that sweet spot. Like, the physics feel good. The drift mechanic feels tight. It is not a pushover in terms of its difficulty as well. Like, you've really got to get a handle on the drifting in order to stay competitive as the races get, as you make your way through. It's a single developer. The developer, he goes by Walaber, Walaber. It is, he was the person who developed Jellycar. So if you remember back in like late 2000s, early teens, that kind of flash-based game where you kind of had, 2D car that was kind of bouncing its way through a bunch of kind of obstacles. This is somebody, I was surprised that it's the same developer who did Where's My Water for mobile. But it's just a lot of fun. Good kind of late 90s era music and really hits in that sweet spot. So Laura, thanks for your question. We'll come back to that after we wrap up here with our round robin, because I see if Game Logic has any thoughts on your question. So that's Parking Garage Rally Circuit. It's currently on sale on Steam for like $7.50. So Game Logic, you also have been doing a little bit of racing, and so Trackmania, are you creating tracks, running tracks, playing user created tracks? What's your engagement with Trackmania?
Yeah, I don't do any track creation. I play, whatever's available, which means I play a mixture of developer created tracks and UGC. And this is one of those games where I typically will not like go out of my way to play UGC. Like I was never a big fan in Halo of playing those Forge maps, because I was like, I'm not going to put hours in getting familiar with this one map just so I can play it when I select it by manual rotation. Like because they didn't pull those maps into like just the regular rotation. They eventually started doing that, but not in general. And I don't want to experiment with like the 82% of the content that isn't great, right? To find the 18%, that's worthwhile. Actually, this time around, so Trackmania is a version of the game that came out in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, after we've had kind of years of like different variants of Trackmania, like constantly coming out like every few months, with this wild number of tracks that were associated with each version. And then depending on which version you bought, sometimes you would have all the content that was associated with that version, but then there might be like another version that was available in the launcher and you could play those tracks. So what they did a few years ago is they settled down into this one common business model approach that was ubiquitous across both PC and I think console. But and as a result, you just get this incredible amount of content that gets created notionally around the idea of an annual release schedule. I went back to it this past week. I tried starting to swim through the developer created content and the UGC, and I just got to the point where I was like, because I hadn't paid for like the annual subscription, so I was like, fine, it's a really kind of Byzantine way of like you getting to the list of like all of the content. It's not, if you're starting the game new, it doesn't present that to you very intuitively, right? You get used to it, after you've played for a while. But anyway, I went to this thing. I first started trying to sort through the list to get to the free content. There is no sort, there is no filter where you could say, hey, only show me the free stuff. You have to go through it, right? And finally, after about the sixth tile that I'd landed on that was not like user created content, I was like, fine, Ubisoft, you win. Here's your $20. I just want to come in here and play the tracks, and I don't want to have to be bothered with whether it's free or paid. Right? I was like, the $20 is worth it to me for that. So I paid the $20, and then I just started playing the content right top to bottom. So it's been fun going back to it. It's got lots of kind of weird, I guess I'll say, rules, but just like the way they implement like ghosts in the game, and like you're never really racing against a person and yada yada yada. But I had fun, with the various tracks that were thrown at me. Again, kind of ramping and coming back up. There were 4 like I think they were the holiday but Formula One tracks to like kick off the season, and so I wound up playing, spending a good chunk of time playing those. But I love Trackmania. There's a lot of tracks now that skate closer to kind of more traditional racing tracks than some of the crazy, hey, go through this concrete tunnel, run up the side of this wall, make a jump on a horizontal surface onto like the next level, do a 360 degree spin, land, and then race back down. Like there's less of craziness like that. Those Formula One tracks were just straight up kind of normal racing tracks, but but they also require like full demand of your faculties, right, as you try and figure out like what you need to do to run those track at the speeds. Because while they're regular tracks, the compensating factor for that is like the span and gap between like bronze, silver, and gold is commensurate with the fact that they're like a regular track. Like they really push you hard to go from bronze, right, to earning anything higher. So, but I've had a great time with it.
Thanks for the update. I really haven't followed Trackmania since, wow, I played some like mid 2000s, late 2000s. And then at what point, like maybe in the mid teens, they went to almost a subscription model, if I remember correctly. So this sounds like they've pivoted again from that, but always has been enjoyable to dive in and play through.
Well, it's a subscription model, and I'm not familiar with the other. I wouldn't say the way that the other ones were. It was less like the subscription model was there if you wanted to participate in it, but there was also just standard regular free content that was there for you, and it was less Byzantine to wade through and figure out what was free and what was paid. So yeah, like I said. So it is a subscription model now, but it's literally there's only one subscription, and that's the only way you can buy additional access. It's just one flat fee of $20, and that gives you access for like an entire year, and then they won't ask you for any more money, right, until that anniversary is up.
Yeah, that's nice. I think that at one point it was like a monthly subscription or an annual piece. Like there was a number of, they were playing around with those different different models. So we got a little bit of time here, so let's see if, did you see Warwana's question in terms of AMD 970, and if you've got any info or thoughts on that?
Yes, I'll go ahead and read it out for the audio listeners. Game Logic DBQ Hams, do you have thoughts on the AMD 9070 XT by any chance? I'm looking to upgrade, and budget was looking at a 4070 Ti Super or 4080, but I really want to give AMD a chance. So the 9070 XT is their entrance into this generation of PC gaming GPUs to compete against NVIDIA. They're not going high end like they did last time, so they're not putting out something that is trying to be in the same space that I want to say like the 7900 XTX and 7900 XT were. So they've mentioned that they're not attacking like the uber high end. Those chips are supposed to be available at the end of this month. So you probably have another week and a half, 2 weeks till they start really showing up at retail. It's very interesting. I was talking about this morning with Paul's Gaming Live, and eNate had come through. So, I mean, if you are really, really dedicated on trying to get next gen GPU capability, but price is a key priority, then I'm not gonna handcuff you to the radiator and tell you to not go buy a Radeon, right? That is the wonder of those beasts, right? They're more generous with VRAM, and they offer them at better prices in most cases. What I found, and Paul's Gaming Live kind of corroborated this, like what I found for me, my problem with Radeon GPUs are they don't do the things that I need to do from a content creation perspective. So they never did well, like as the in a box that was supposed to be like a streaming PC. They definitely didn't do well when I was trying to like live stream or run video capture from the same box I was actually gaming on. Separating it into a different box would make it keep up, but there were always kind of like some graphical art. Like it just wasn't a great, in my opinion, they're not great cards for content creators. Then the other problem for me is then you couple that with the notion that to keep the things running in a Windows box, you will typically have to do two things. You will have to periodically know how to boot into safe mode, use DDU to wipe all of your drivers, which I can't remember, because I want to say DDU shells out into like a DOS-like environment. Then you have to come back, right, restore the card like in the Windows presence, because the DDUing these drivers is going to make it like Windows, I think, no longer see your card. And so then you have to run that like again. And so what I just found was like, look, booting into safe mode and manually handling my drivers. Okay, I could deal with that, but to do all of that just so I could play on a card that also didn't fit my needs for content creation, for me, the calculus just become, why would I ever be bothered with this when I could just go out and buy an NVIDIA GPU? If you're strictly looking for raster, and you want to come in at a good price, my thoughts on the 9700 XT are probably a good viable option, but definitely wait till benchmarks come out, and definitely wait for reviews, because of the 4090 12 volt high power harness debacle with the 4090. People forget that the 7900 XTX and 7900 XT also came out with massive problems out of the gate that were not corrected for, I want to say, like about a month. And those are also not cards that I would recommend like dropping $1,000 for until they get, that sorted out. So I would also let those cards get out in the wild and wait a couple months, 3 months maybe, to ensure that there's been enough uptake that any kind of design flaw or issue is reported and dealt with. But providing you pass all those bars, right? The 9070 XT should be a good viable option. If you're not going to go that and you're going to look at 4070 Ti or 4080 on Tom's Hardware, there was an article. I'll put it in the show notes, called the GPU hierarchy, and I really love that chart because it's the one chart that really takes all of the benchmarks for all cards, regardless of generation, and puts them on one chart. But then they also triage them by, here's how this card performs at 1080p, here's how this card performs at 1440p, and then they do at the lower levels reses, they do them, I think, for 2 brackets. It's like 1080p like low, I think, and it means like low graphic settings, and then 1080p ultra and 1440p right same way, and then it does a 4K one. So if you're looking at how your card compares to cards that you're thinking about upgrading to, that I think that's a great chart to go by. So if you're going to look at alternatives, I would probably take a look at that chart and just see how your current card stacks right up against its aggregate and integrated list of all other GPUs, regardless of generation.
Great, thanks, Game Logic. And War, thanks for the question. Appreciate that. Always glad to have questions from those stopping by, and it's great to have you here and engaging. So, and we didn't talk about any hardware this episode, so now we've gotten our quota of hardware updates for the episode as well. Thanks for dropping that in the chat, Game Logic, in terms of the Tom's Hardware article that you were talking about. So that brings us pretty much to the end of our show. We've got a handful of kind of bigger releases coming out this week. Avowed, coming out of Obsidian, the premium edition launched on the 13th, but this coming week here, we get the general edition that comes out. It's day one on Game Pass if you have Game Pass Ultimate. Also coming out this week is from Don't Nod, is Lost Records. This is, again, a kind of narrative. Lost Records Bloom and Rage, Tape 1. First one comes out now, and then we get another one, I believe, in April. We have this, we saw the kind of stylistic, kind of coming-of-age story. It had a very 1980s trailer, movie trailer for it, in terms of when it showed up at the Xbox showcase over during June last year. This is something that is also on Game Pass day one, and last week during Sony's State of Play, it was announced that it is also a day one on PlayStation Plus if you have the premium or the whatever the top 2 tiers are. That this is day one there as well. Like a Dragon, the pirate Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza is coming on the 21st. Also on the 21st, if you're paying for the premium editions, is PGA Tour 2K25, as I was talking about earlier in the show. So maybe I'll be talking about it next week if I can convince myself that I should drop that much money on it. Otherwise, the full release of it comes out on the 28th, that last week of the month, which means we also get Monster Hunter Wilds coming out at the end of the month as well. So definitely a lot to be playing here in these last 2 weeks of February. Game Logic, anything kind of hitting your radar for this coming week?
No, not in particular. These all look like great games that I would normally be interested in. But like I said, I'm mostly playing live service games as a service now. I don't see anything here that would particularly divert me from that. I think probably the next major thing that the industry will have kind of on general offer for me is Doom: The Dark Ages, right? Which I will divert, from my Call of Duty play and whatnot to take a tour through that.
Nice. I know that I'll probably dip into Avowed to see how it plays a little bit. Always appreciate Obsidian's stories. The reviews have really been kind of mixed there, like some 6s, some 9s. So I'll be kind of curious there. But Lost Records definitely has been on my radar. And, so I'll be glad to check that out as well. So I'll be having that to talk about next week. Next week, we all three of us should be here. Tom Master should be on the mic for the host. And we'll see what episode 376 brings us. But this has been episode 375. I have been your host, DPQ Hams. Game Logic, thanks for joining me. Warwana, thanks for coming by and interacting with us, throwing some questions our way, keeping us honest. Appreciate that. Anybody else who gets a chance to, who has been listening to us, or whether you're listening on the audio version or up on YouTube, glad to have you stop by. We do our show every Sunday evening, unless pre-announced, as we all have schedules that sometimes conflict. But we come back to you every week, as we've been doing for 375 episodes. Oh, we just got more to talk about, and it's great to be here together to talk about it. So until next week, play games you love those you play with, and be kind to yourself. Good night, everybody.